I am very honored and happy to introduce my beautiful cousin Karen, who's traveled to visit us from East Aurora, New York, just outside of Buffalo, New York. And just so glad to have her here today. And I thought I'd start us off with just my memory of this incident, because believe it or not, on the early morning of February 13th, 2009, I was still awake at 1 in the morning. I was folding laundry, a busy mom of 4 smaller children, and I had one of the 24-hour news channels on. And I was just sharing this story with Karen yesterday, actually. I don't think I'd ever told her this before, but all of a sudden it came over on the news that there had been a plane crash in Clarence, New York, and I thought, oh no, Clarence Center, that's where Doug and Karen live. And so I immediately pulled out my address book, and I dialed their number, but I didn't dial the whole way. I got to the last number, and I thought, what are you doing? You're going to terrify them. Why are you calling them at 1 in the morning? What are the odds that this has happened to them? And I went to bed, and the next morning I woke up pretty early. I didn't sleep very well that night, truthfully. And I heard on the news that just one person had been killed on the ground from this incident. All 49 people in the plane had perished. But I immediately felt a sense of relief, because I thought from the pictures I'd seen a few hours earlier, there's no way anybody could have survived that incident, because the house was in flames. And so I felt everything was okay. But it was within about an hour, my husband called me from work, and he said, Stacy, he said, I think that was your cousin's house. And I said, it couldn't have been, because only one person on the ground was gone. And he said, but it says here, Doug Walensky, age 63. And that's how I found out the news. And so anyway, she will share her story now of this tragedy, but also the miracle of Flight 347, one on the ground.
Whoops, I got all these cords. I have all these cords, so if I fall, try and do it gracefully. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you so much for inviting me. I mean, it's always exciting to come see Stacy and her family, but boy, to have an out-of-state book gig, wow. I feel like I'm, moving on here. This is great. One thing Stacy said, and I did plan to bring this up, but she had mentioned that there were 49 people lost on the plane that night. And actually, myself and the other families who lost loved ones, we like to point out that there were actually 50 souls on that plane, because the one woman was 7 months pregnant. So, 50 on the plane, and unfortunately, 1 on the ground. And although it wasn't intentional, I always felt that my husband, Doug, was like an afterthought, because he would always, be tagging along at the end, and 1 on the ground. So when I decided to do a book, it was like a no-brainer to decide what to name the book. And I'll get into that night. I kind of saved that for the end. But I'll start by just saying what kind of encouraged me to read a book. Yeah, I do read a book too. But I said, why not write one? But actually, when I first moved, at first, after the crash, I'm just looking for a little card I had here, but I'll remember it. For the first almost year, I still lived in the Clarence area after the crash. I worked for the Clarence School District and their personnel department, so I remained there. And at the time, 2 of my girls were still at home, so we still stayed in the Clarence area. But we had later found out, after we had rented this condo that we were living in, that it was right on the flight path. And especially at night at about 10:15, which is the time the plane crashed, it was really hard to see these planes coming in. Because actually the plane was probably about 10 miles from the Buffalo airport, so close, so close. So then I decided I had to move, get out of the area. So I did move south of Clarence, and actually south of Buffalo, to give you a little geography. And I moved to a little town called East Aurora, New York. It's like, little Norman Rockwell location. So my kids by that time were gone, so I was an empty nester, and I knew I had to keep busy. So I looked at their community ed offerings, and there were a couple creative writing options. And I liked to dabble in writing over the years. When my kids started to go to school, when we lived in the Cincinnati area, I was more than happy to volunteer to do publicity for the school. And I developed a newsletter, and I'd write little articles for the local paper. So I had a lot of fun with that. But that was basically all the writing I ever did. So I went to this writing group. I took a little piece I wrote about living in front of my grandmother growing up in Buffalo, and they liked it. And it was that encouragement and some encouragement from some other people that made me think about writing a book, because I couldn't believe everything I was writing. All these stories, our mentor, or he doesn't like to be called teacher, but he would like suggest some prompt to write about. And like you think, what am I gonna write about? And then all of a sudden, I just had all these ideas, and I'm writing about Doug and our family and things that had happened since the crash and before the crash. So I just was accumulating all these things. So that was number one, the encouragement that I received from the writing group. But then in January of 2011, I received a Facebook message from somebody who said his name was Eric Brady. He was a sports writer for USA Today. And he was originally from Kenmore, New York, which is, again, a suburb of Buffalo. And he knew my husband was a big sports memorabilia fan. So he wanted to do an article about Doug and his collection and his, love of family and any sport in Buffalo. So had no clue who he was, never heard of him. And he didn't have like a little regular picture on his message. It was like a little caricature of himself. So I'm thinking, I don't know who this guy is. So at that point, I had an attorney, and I couldn't move in life without checking things through the attorney. So he checked him out, and Eric was legitimate. So he came to Buffalo in, I think it was June of 2011, and he interviewed a lot of people that Doug knew. And he always said that the article would be on the front page. So I just assumed he's a sports writer, it's going to be on the sports section of the paper. But where did I do with it? Here it is. It's getting kind of beat up. It was actually on the front page of USA Today. Let me just show you. We didn't get the headline, but that was okay. But down here is the beginning of the article, and there's this teeny tiny little picture of Doug. You can barely see him. And I thought, oh, too bad that picture wasn't bigger. But then when you open the paper up, here's this huge picture of my daughter and myself, which I personally could have did with I could have did with that tiny picture. That would have been good. But it was a wonderful article, and he really captured, the essence of Doug, and we were just so pleased with it. And because I had his attention, here's a professional writer, and I think I'm gonna show him a few things I wrote. So I did, and he too was encouraging, and he liked the idea of, me writing a book. So I decided to lay it out. There's different parts in the book. And the first section deals with 1 year from the crash, so from February 2009 to February 2010. And each month I'll tell you what we did during that time, and sometimes it amazes me how much we did in a month. And then after the story of the month, I'll put some stories in there that pertain to things that happened in there. And as an example, I'm going to tell you about August. My second daughter, Lori, was the first to get married. And we had Lori was engaged at the time of the crash, and so was my older daughter, Kim. And I should mention that within 26 months, all 4 girls were married. They did know the guys before, but within 26 months, they were all married. So that in itself kept me busy for a while. Unfortunately, we've had a couple divorces since then, but they're happy. That's the whole thing. But anyway, so Lori's wedding was scheduled for August 1st, 2009. And her and her fiance were in the Kentucky area when the crash occurred. So they arrived in Buffalo the day after the crash. And the first thing she said was, we'll change the date of the wedding. You know, we don't have to keep that wedding date. And I said to her, no, we're going to do the wedding because we're going to need normal things in our life. And believe me, it really helped to have that wedding. So it was definitely bittersweet. You know, I never thought I would be walking my daughters down the aisle, but just a bittersweet day, but really beautiful. And we knew Doug was with us that day. But shortly after, like, you know, you're riding this roller coaster, getting all excited about the wedding, then the wedding's there, and then it's like, it's all over. So, you know, it was like, what now? Well, people had stuff for us to do. After the crash, they went through the site and retrieved, you would not believe the items that were retrieved. And someone had told one of the other family members that they collected over 40,000 items from the crash site. And unfortunately, most of those were ours. I always knew we had too much stuff. But I mean, when you see the pictures and the flames, it's like you just say to yourself, how could all those items survive? And a lot of it was paper, little pieces of paper. And they just collected everything. And I asked somebody once, like, you know, how can you like do that, you know, for a job? And he said, you know, we do it for the families because they felt you never know what's going to create a memory for someone. It could just be a little, you know, piece of paper, but it has meaning for that family. So they, you know, went through all this stuff. They dug, I forget how many feet down into the ground, and they took all that soil to a hangar in the airport, and they sifted through it again. And then everything they collected, and we also had a detached garage that wasn't touched. And we didn't have cars in it. It was like all the extra sports memorabilia that Doug had that was in the garage. Plus, I mean, you know, just, childhood memories and things from my parents. Everything was in that garage because we had a little house. So they took everything that was collected and they shipped it down to Texas. And they sanitized and kind of categorized it. And at first, we could go online, and they would show us the items they believed were ours. And surprisingly, we could recognize just about everything. Then, where is it? I think we got, whoops, wait a minute, where is that? Oh, that's that one. I'm going to trip, I know. They sent us these catalogs. And I think we had about 7 or 8 of them, but there were individual pictures of every single item that they had found. You can look at it later. Just, you know, again, little pieces of paper. And like when it came to my husband's sports collection, I always say, you know, if he hadn't been killed in the crash, looking at his sports collection that he had saved since he was in 3rd grade, and collected, you know, since then, it probably would have killed him if he would have saw that. So it was so sad to see all that, too. So in August, getting back to August, they had sent our items back to us. And first of all, my daughter Kim and I, she was the only one still in the area. We went back to the airplane hangar, and it was a room, I would say, half this size. But each wall was just lined with boxes, maybe stacked 5, 6 high. And Kim and I had to go through every single box. And for the attorneys, we had to say where each item had been in the house. So we ended up kind of making piles. Anything that was sports related was in one pile. Anything that we did not recognize and knew it wasn't ours went in another pile, and there was hardly any of that. Like I said, it's just amazing that they could, you know, separate that. Then there was another section that had, I think, about 32 boxes in it, And those were items we knew were ours, but we knew we were going to have to like take time to look through it. Again, a lot of those paper items, it would have just taken us, it took us 7-8 days as it was to look through all this stuff. But, those paper items, we knew we had to look at closer. So 32, I think it was about 32 boxes, and those were taken to my garage, and it took me, and I'm not kidding, 5 years to go through all that. Just because, it was so emotional to go through these boxes, because I just had all these memories. And what else do we separate? Oh, the destroyed things that we knew were garbage, but we could not get rid of those until after the trial. We had to keep all that. And I can't think what the fifth pile would have been. But anyways, so at one time I had 6 storage sheds, and like when the trial ended, we did get rid of the garbage one really fast. And everything had, even though some of the smell was probably from like whatever they cleaned it, but you could still like almost smell like jet fuel. And like the cleaning solution, every time I see like a dryer sheet, that's what it smells like. And then everything was in, the boxes, but little bags that had numbers on them. And then, we would have all this stuff inside. So that was in August, we had to do that. And then also in August, I had to meet with the insurance adjuster, and I had to tell her everything that was in the house. So to make the process easier, and like people said, how could you do that? But for me, it was kind of a healing process. I don't lament, losing physical items that night. The horrible part was losing Doug and other people losing their lives. That's what you grieve for. But our items, we look at them and we remember the memories from looking at these items. So I decided the best way that I could go through this with her was to draw a little diagram, floor plan of the house. And then I said to her, okay, we're going to pretend we're walking through the front door and we're going to work our way through the rooms. And I did end up writing a story about that. It's called Requiem for a Home. And I'm going to take my glasses off so I can read. And I'll see if I can do this with one hand. So I might do this for now because I don't think I can hold it. So anyways, we are in the dining room. Once again, I had to give numbers to the adjuster. Details, please, on dishes and crystals, she asked. How many Desert Rose dishes had been passed on to me from my mother? Whoops. Were there, thank you so much. Thank you. Were there vegetable platters, bowls, and a gravy boat? Were my mother's and grandmother's silver settings for 8, 10, or 12? Napkins, tablecloths, and lace doilies? How about those china cups and saucers given to me by my godmother, Carol, as a wedding gift? Grandma Schwab's sister, Aunt Frances, had hand-painted some china. How many of those did I have? A beveled chest filled to the rim with photo albums was there. How many albums did you have? One special album had been put together by Doug for the first-year anniversary of meeting each other. He had saved ticket stubs, napkins, newspaper clippings, and playbills. He had even gone back and taken pictures of where we first met, the Crow's Nest and Duff's. There was a picture of rocks on the shore of Lake Erie in Wanaka, where we had shared one of our first kisses. Yes, he was a romantic and definitely a keeper. We're going to go to one of the girls' bedrooms. This is the front bedroom. That was my oldest daughter's house. Her room faced the front of the house. Her room reflected her life and times. Teaching supplies, wedding magazines, trinkets from a trip to London, Monet prints, dragonfly items, clothes were neatly hung in the large closet. Jill's room was the most haphazard. She had brought all her college stuff home, piles of things she was planning to take with her to North Carolina for her internship were being organized. There were also possessions of her boyfriend stored there since his enlistment in the Army. Another large closet, which was so unexpected to find in this 1920s house, was filled with her clothes and those of her sisters. A good assortment of homecoming and prom dresses hung together, an aura of special teenage time surrounding them. So that's kind of an idea of how the months are talked about, and then, and I always forget, because also in that August month, I talk about the quilt. The story in the book is called The Quilt, and a friend I worked with, she had said to me, even before we knew what we were getting back, she said, if you get a lot of, Doug's old running shirts, just t-shirts, anything, she said, I have a friend who makes quilts, and I really think she would put one together for you. So everything on this quilt, almost everything, was either in the house that night or in our garage. I can maybe just tell by looking at it. I'm sure this t-shirt from the Super Bowl in Atlanta was in the house, just by the looks of it. But the thing that I like to point out is, whoops, I'm getting cluttered up here, is this orange piece of material, says Wiley Distribution Wholesale. And I met through actually Cindy, the friend I was just talking about. Her husband was managing a baseball team, and he wanted my sister and I to come out and, come to one of the games. So the first time I saw Doug, he was in this orange uniform. And he never believed this, but I swear, and I'm in a religious, church, so I'm going to tell the truth. This is not a lie. I saw him. He was the catcher, and I watched him through the whole game. And afterwards, we were walking towards Cindy's husband, and there were two guys with him, and one was my catcher. And now my sister always had dates. Always had the guys, where me, I could probably count like on one hand. So as we're walking towards the guys, I looked at my sister and I said, if the dark-haired, curly guy is one of the guys Jean wants us to meet, he's mine. So I claimed him right off the bat. I wasn't taking any chances. So he didn't believe that story, but it's true. And it was a lot, when we first started seeing each other, it was always at a baseball game. And, it was like probably a good month or two before I actually saw him in something else besides a uniform. And I had a piece of what he had on the first other thing I saw, but I don't know what I did with it. But, we were in a restaurant, and he went in the men's room to change, and he came out with this little tight-knit blue shirt on. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's got other clothes. Wow. And he looks pretty good in those clothes. Yeah, hi Doug. Yeah. So anyway, and luckily he had feelings too, so it all worked out good. But anyway, I'll talk a little bit now about, because I always forget the quilt, so that's why I had to throw that in there. The next section of the book is about my association with the other family members who lost loved ones. And in the beginning, I was just really almost afraid, to be with them. They were always would offer to, give us an invitation to join them for different things. But I just, I knew the pain we were going through, and I didn't know if I could, face their fears, because I knew if I saw them, I was going to see their pain in their faces. So it was like a very gradual thing that I, would get to meet them. And I'd like to point out, in 2010, the air safety bill was passed in Washington. And the 34 family members were so instrumental in getting that done. What, a common little people can do to actually have a result that has really made flying so much safer nowadays. And in the beginning, as you might imagine, I was pretty busy that first year, just kind of getting my life together and helping my kids, adjust. So I did not go down to Washington with them in the beginning because, like I'd been out of work for like over a month or something, and I couldn't see like going to my boss and saying, well, I'm taking another week off because I'm going down to DC. But if I did participate like in writing emails to senators and congressmen, I mean, we'd get a call maybe on a Friday and say, okay, I'm giving you 60 names, and I want you all to send like individual emails to these people so that we can bombard them with messages. So I supported them in that way. But it was not until the 4th anniversary that I did start going to DC with them. And that was a real eye-opener, because to me, a bill got passed and it just, everything was implemented. Well, it doesn't work that way. I mean, just this past year, the final component of the bill, which is a database that will give information on any pilot that is applying with an airline. It'll give them a full history of that pilot's qualifications. And that just went into effect within the last few months. So 13 years later, it's pretty amazing. But again, some of the changes in airline safety, definitely changes in airline policy about vacation time, sick time for the pilots, spot checks, random checks to make sure things are the way they should be. Longer, and this was the big one, at the time of the crash, a co-pilot, or I guess they would call them the first officer, they only needed 250 hours of flying time in order to sit in that co-pilot seat before, with passengers. It's now 1,500 hours. So, big change. And, there's been a lot of opposition from airlines, especially the little regional airlines or airports where there's small airports, because it's sometimes hard for them to get pilots now because of that. But so important that has gone through. And also, at the time of the crash, nobody gets paper tickets anymore, I guess, but back then you did. On their tickets, there was no indication that their flight was operated by Colgan, which was a regional airline. Colgan was flying under Continental. The Continental logo was on that little Colgan plane. And, I remember the attorneys going, and those sick bags, and all the little magazines you found in that plane were Continental. So from after that, it is now indicated on your reservation if part of your flight will involve a regional carrier and who that regional carrier is. So just a few of the changes that have taken place. What did I say? Everything I wanted about the families, I think so. Then there's Longstreet. We do have a very peaceful, small, unobtrusive memorial in the neighborhood. There was a lot of resistance at first from the neighbors, because I think they were concerned that, this big monument was going to go up in this little street. So we worked with a graduate student from the University of Buffalo. We had a foundation that was made up of family members. I think our judge was in it at the time, and myself and some of the other family members and some people from the street itself. But we worked with this Joe, and he just came up with he listened to what we wanted, and he came through. And the one thing that means so much to me, there's a walkway that's in the shape of a wing, and it has 51 little pavers walking up to a stone that lists all the names of who was lost that night, and also lists Jill and I as survivors, which is nice. But as you're walking down that path, you'll see these indentations, and those indentations are actually the layout of our house, so that when I'm walking, I can say, yep, that was the living room, that was the dining room, and it just like means so much to me. And it lets, whoever's there to picture what this house looked like. And we had the 10-year anniversary in 2019. And a lot of media, talking to us. And I kept saying to the media people, I've kept in touch with a few of my immediate neighbors. But I said, I wish somebody would talk to the people on Long Street and know, how this has affected their lives. Is having that memorial there, really as terrible as some of them thought it was going to be. And nobody really did that. But about a month after the anniversary, this thought is in my mind, and a month after the anniversary, one of the neighbors I have kept in touch with, he sent me this picture. And it's in the winter, so it looks really pretty in the spring. But it's a picture of the site where our house was. And, like I said, not too pretty, but it really is nice. But the amazing thing is to look at that and just realize that this plane, and it didn't kind of slide in, it kind of plopped down, but it just plopped down in that one little area and didn't go into the other neighbors' houses. So that's pretty crazy. So he sent me this, and then he sent me a card. And it says, I saw what you did there, thank you. And then he wrote, Dear Karen, I saw this picture and thought you might want a copy. I got one for myself. It is from the same vantage point of one taken 10 years ago. That image from 10 years ago is burned into my brain. I want to replace the old with the new. To me, this image shows a healed neighborhood with an understated, thoughtful, and appropriate memorial at its center. Thank you for the gift. Well, of course, I cried a lot. But I thought, oh my gosh, here I'm thinking about this, and then he sends me this that kind of, it just kind of assured me that, okay, maybe we did the right thing then. We did not have a house built there. Well, we could have never lived there, but I just couldn't see somebody else living there either. So anyways, and there also is a picture up here that basically will show you the same scene like the night after the crash. So you can compare that to this. And there is also a picture of what the house looked like. So little house, yeah. But we were happy there. So we did that. I'm not going to get into the trial too much. It takes too much time. I'll just say it was not a pleasant experience. Our trial came 5 years after the crash. We were the last family they dealt with. I wonder why. And they had made us an offer. It wasn't a bad offer, but we talked to the judge before we were going to decide if we were going to take it. And all the attorneys, not only mine, but the other attorneys for the other families, had done a lot of investigating into the airlines. And the official cause of the crash was pilot error. They were, when you listen to the voice box, they were at a point where they should not have been talking in the cockpit, for one thing. And they were just chatting away, and you can hear the co-pilot at one point say, yeah, I've never been in an icing situation, and I really have no experience, and I don't know what I would do. Well, at that point, that's probably what was happening to the plane. And I remember hearing that, and I'm going, you're going through it now, pay attention. And by the time they realized that the plane was, descending when it shouldn't, it was like within 26 seconds, I think it crashed. But anyways, by the time they realized, there's a thing called the stick shift, and they should have pushed on it to make the plane, no, wait a minute, let me think. No, they should have pushed on it, which would have put the plane going down, but then they could have, easily brought it back up. but instead of pushing it, he pulled it forward, which just took the plane up and it just lost control. And they were heading towards the airport, but it completely turned the plane around so that they were heading away from the airport, and then it just plopped down. Let me see if I want to talk about the night yet. Is there anything else before I forget, I do want to mention, when you get to June in the months, that was June 2009 was the first time that we had a scholarship, that we had decided to start a scholarship fund in Doug's memory. And we started out with one scholarship at our Clarence High School. The kids all went to high school there, and Doug used to go and talk to the kids about his experiences in Vietnam. And I worked there, and they did like so much when everything happened for us. So we started out with one scholarship, and then from the second year on, we give 2 scholarships at Clarence to a boy and a girl who love history, because Doug did love history. And then after the book came out, we started a 3rd scholarship, and that goes to a high school where Doug went, which is Hutchinson Tech High School in downtown Buffalo. So I'm very happy that we can give 3 scholarships now. And all the proceeds from the sale of the book, which is $20, go right to the scholarship fund. So I'm just really happy that we're able to do this. And I am working on a 2nd book. It's not really a follow-up to this, but it's called Pieces of My Puzzle. And all the people, places, and things that have kind of influenced me as I, have gone through my life journey. So I'm hoping that will come out in June. And I'll just talk quickly about the puzzle piece theme here. You'll see the puzzle pieces on the quilt. And puzzle pieces kept like popping up. First of all, Doug had, in January 2009, he had been trying for years to get these black and white puzzles from 1932, I think it was, of the Buffalo Bison baseball team. So he finally got them, I'm pretty sure it was January 2009. So we had been working as a family to put all these puzzles together to see, how many were complete, which I think most of them were. So there was one puzzle left on the table that night that needed to be completed. So that was kind of the first thing. Then my daughter Lori found an email after everything happened that Doug had sent her when she lived in Brooklyn. And Doug's dad was born in Brooklyn. So he thought while she was there that she could maybe go to the historical, society or something. And as he put it, get some more pieces to our puzzle. So there we had that. And then we were at my aunt and Stacy's grandmother. She had let us stay at her house after the crash. And we had there were 9 of us, because the 4 girls, their boyfriends, and me. So there were 9 of us in this house. She was recuperating from some surgery, so wasn't there. But, we had all this stuff on the dining room table, and I saw this little piece of paper, and it had a puzzle piece on it. And I could tell it was my youngest daughter, Jill's, handwriting. So I said, is that an idea for the tombstone? And she goes, no, she said, that's an idea for a tattoo I'm thinking of getting. Hey, Jill. And she did get it. So just all these references to puzzle pieces. And then, unfortunately, I will stand here and say, my name is Karen, and I am a jigsaw puzzle addict. Which the pandemic had a lot to do with. But anyways, puzzle pieces important. So, okay, I think I'll get right to, because I don't know how I'm doing now. I'm doing okay on time, Stacy? Okay. And I knew there was something else I wanted to say about when I finally did go to D.C. with the family members. As I said, I just had this fear about being with them and, how would I react to their sorrow. And I found... it just popped up, I think, on Facebook one time. Let's see. A posting on Facebook offered some resolution to that question, like, can I, face these people? Can I be with them? It was an article that had appeared in the New York Times on December 25th, 2012, following the senseless murders in Newtown, Connecticut. And the writer, Maureen Dowd, asked, why God? And this Father O'Neill referred to lightening the darkness around the dying and those close to them. So Father O'Neill's words reminded me of my limited relationship with the 3407 families. And this is a quote from Father O'Neill. I have never found it easy to be with people who suffer, to enter into the chaos of others. Yet every time I have done so, it has been a gift to me, better than the wrapped and ribboned packages. I'm pulled out of myself to be love's presence to someone else, even as they are love's presence to me. I will never satisfactorily answer the question why, because no matter what response I give, it will always fall short. What I do know is that an unconditionally loving presence soothes broken hearts, binds up wounds, and renews us in life. This is a gift that we can all give, particularly to the suffering. When that gift is given, God's love is present. Those words encouraged me. Now I had an opportunity to console and be consoled. It was time for me to jump the hurdle of guilt. So that definitely helped me to have a more valid part in the lives of the 3407 families. Okay, that night, Thursday night, I did not have work that day because there was some icing issues in our area, so they closed the school. I think Doug had work, if I remember. The night before, Jill, our youngest daughter, and Doug had gone to a Buffalo Sabres game, which, Doug would get tickets from work sometimes, and he'd take, turns taking the different girls. So the night before, he and Jill had enjoyed a nice evening watching the Sabres. I can't remember if they won or lost. But anyways, so that night, now Doug did not watch TV that much. He was always doing something else. But that night, we were watching, and some of you might remember them, VHS tapes. Remember those? But anyways, we had taped American Idol. So we were watching that for most of the night, and I don't know, a couple times, I think Jill was upstairs in her sister's bedroom in the front of the house watching something. Well, she was watching Grey's Anatomy, that much I know. But I don't know what else she was wearing during the night. But I guess she must have been watching The Office at one point, because I think Jess called Jill and was pointing out that one of the characters on The Office was wearing a blouse that I think we had given one of the girls for Christmas. So she called that. And I think Jill, ran down and told us that. So about 10 o'clock, Doug had left the room for a few minutes. And I really wanted to change the channel. I wanted to watch, Ace of Cakes. They were at Macy's for an anniversary. And I really thought, I want to see that. So when he came back in the room and sat down on the couch, he was kind of laying on the couch, I asked him if he wanted to watch the rest of the tape. And he asked me, well, how much longer is it? And I said, well, probably an hour. And my last, connection with my husband, I am so happy that it made me happy, made me laugh. He popped up off the couch and he said, I don't have time for that. And he walked out of the room, but I was laughing because I just thought it was so funny. He just pops off the couch. So I swear that when I changed the channel, it was very close to 10:15. And just all of a sudden, we were on the flight path. So, we heard the planes. Sometimes if you looked out, you could see the windows. They were that low. But, I just stopped it and I said, what is that? And it was just different. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to describe it properly. But it was more of a rumbling than what a plane would sound like. And I thought to myself, if that's a plane, it could hit something. And no sooner did I think that than everything's fallen down around me. And it's like it fell on us, or, landed on us, crashed into us. And like after it happened, I was sitting on this little love seat. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, am I dead or am I alive? I had to think a minute and like, wow, I don't know. And I wish I would have like taken in more of what I was seeing at that point. But I knew it wasn't good. So I looked up and there was a small like opening over my head. But there was something like over it. So I reached up and I tried to push whatever was up there off, and it didn't budge. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll yell because, maybe somebody will hear me. But I knew I couldn't stay there. I knew I had to get out of there. And I have high blood pressure, and, I thought to myself, well, obviously I guess you are alive, so, don't get too upset because, you'll have a heart attack and you'll die or have a stroke or something. So that thought, and also I had watched a 2020 program where they were talking about disasters and saying that oftentimes people die because they panic. So, okay, I'm thinking these two things. So second time, I put my arm up there and this item that was blocking it moved. So to me, that's miracle number one that night, that this object would not move, and the second time it moved. So I started to climb out. And as I'm climbing out, I heard a woman crying. And that's like the first time I thought about Jill. But in the meantime, Jill had been in that front bedroom. The crash knocked her off the bed. She saw flames at the front of the house immediately, so she knew she couldn't go out those windows. So she basically just used her hand to feel the walls until she came to an opening. And it was days before I realized that she had to slide down to the ground, because I just thought the crash would just kind of lower the floor. But she slid down. She had no shoes or socks on. I had socks, no shoes. She didn't realize it at the time, but we're pretty sure that she slid down one of the wings of the plane, because she said it was slippery and it just, it had to be that. So she could not go towards the street part of like in front of the house because of the debris. So she goes to the back of the house, and just as she is coming to the back of the house, she sees me popping out of this hole. So to me, that's another miracle of the night, that she saw me and that we could connect so fast after this had happened. So when I came out, I was like facing, because I just stood on the arm of the love seat and then kind of, pulled myself out. And when I came out, I was like facing our driveway. So our vehicles were parked there because, of course, the garage was full of stuff. So they were, still standing, but like all the windows on the vehicles are like blown out. So then I turned and I looked at the house. And I don't know why I didn't scream and go crazy, to tell you the truth. Maybe because I knew Jill was there. So, you got to put that mother mode on, and you got to be strong for your kids, But I looked at the house and I just remember like shaking my head, and I couldn't believe it, because everything, all the walls were basically gone, except for I could still see the front like window wall a little bit. And I saw like the tail of the plane with this big logo, Continental Globe logo, and that was basically where my kitchen used to be. I saw that. And so Jill and I were coming together, and I had two thoughts in my mind as I walked to her. Of course, I was happy to see her, thrilled, but my thoughts were, he's not going to be here for the girls' weddings. And now I'm going to see what it's like to be by myself. And so Jill and I, came together, and, She said, a plane hit our house, and I remember just like shaking, like going, yeah, yeah. And, then she wanted to know where her dad was, and I said, I don't know. And for the time period when he left that room and before all this happened, I'm pretty positive that my thought is perhaps he went into that dining room to put that last piece in that puzzle, maybe, or he could have been in the front room where the cat was laying, the cat who he said he didn't like, but we know he really loved the cat. He could have been in there and was petting the cat. And unfortunately, the nose of the plane ended up right by those front windows. So knowing, where I thought he probably was, I think I just knew he was gone. I mean, there was just no way. Of course, there was no way we could survive too, but you never know. So anyways, and there was also like a big part of the plane itself where the passengers would have been. There was a big chunk of that still together at that point. But we didn't hear any. I mean, later, months later, one of the fathers who lost a daughter asked me if we had heard like people crying or anything. And I said, no, the only one I heard, was Jill. But then I went, what if we had heard people? I like to think maybe we would have, tried to help them, but you don't know. But anyways, Jill wanted to go towards the debris to look for her dad. And, I now know this is a pretty good sized plane. I see flames, I'm thinking gasoline, and I just grabbed her arm, and I was so afraid like something worse was gonna happen to her. So I just grabbed her arm and I said, we can't, we have to get out of here. And later on when they were talking about our injuries and they said Jill had bruises, I mean, she had some very slight cuts on her feet, but that was it. But she had bruises on her arm, and I'm convinced I gave her those bruises because I was just so scared. And I had a broken collarbone, although I didn't realize it at the time. So we just, ran from, we went behind the houses on our street, and then we got to like the first driveway, because my thought was just like, we got to find people we know, And Stacy was just talking about this last night. When we got to that driveway, Jill had collapsed, and somebody was doing like a video, and you can't see us, but you can hear me. And that's when I knew I wasn't as calm as what I thought. Because I'm yelling, it's our house. I don't know where my husband is. Somebody help my daughter. And it really was, it's chilling. But it used to be on YouTube, and it used to be on, I think, CBS News, but I don't think it's on anymore. But, it's a chilling thing. But then after we didn't recognize any of those people, I look up, and Paul Biter, who sent this photo, he's just standing in front of me. And the look on his face, I'll never forget it. He's just looking at Jill and I, and he's going, what are you doing here? He could, because he's looking at this inferno across the street, and then we're standing there. They claim there were like at least two explosions after the plane crashed. Well, there was like no flames where Jill and I were originally. So any explosions probably happened when we left. And like during the trial, it was, they were trying to like say how much time there was between when the crash happened and when Jill and I actually got to the neighbors. And I think they figured it was probably like less than 15 minutes, like maybe even 10 minutes. And it's, it seemed like forever at the time. But, just unbelievable that we were there. I won't go into, if you want to see read all the details, get the book. But I want to read, do I have a little time to read just a little bit more? Is that?
Finishing up maybe in just a couple of minutes.
Okay, I'm going to read one poem then. I'll read one poem, and then if you have any questions, sorry, I get long-winded. Okay, so now that you kind of know the story of the crash and what happened that night to us, I wrote this poem that deals with the sounds I heard that night and how certain sounds still affect me today. So this is called sounds. Distant droning plane engine, a sound so often passing by. Then unrecognizable, low and crashing close behind. Thundering vibrations rent the stillness of the night. No lightning gave a warning of the unwelcome intruder entering our lives. Crashing walls, harbor of safety no more. Secured fortress shattered. Safety is an illusion. You cannot hide from reality. Silence, all is still. A hush surrounds me. Is this the death that I often feared? Survival whispers, not yet. A daughter's cry. Lustily you announced your arrival as you emerged from my womb. Now your cry greets my emergence, the sweetest sound despite carnage all around. Moments gone, memories far from faded. Visions hasten to return. Constant apprehension never lessened. Phantoms so reluctant to depart. Howling, whistling wind, eerie cries of those lost, lamenting their departure, reminding those left behind, remember me. Creaking boards, straining from the weight of such heavy hearts, chills coursing down the spine, anticipation of sorrow soon released. Scraping snowplow, distant moans unleashed, vibrato raising, creeping closer, closer. Please be on your way. Beating heart, adrenaline has reached its peak. Remembrance heightens fear. Could fate be callous to repeat an act so cruel? Escaping breath, release oppression trapped inside. Take your place beside those cries. Mingle with the spirits retained, those who left without goodbyes. Okay. Thank you again for having me. Does anybody have questions? Anybody? No? Okay, yes.
The whole process of collecting all the parts, is that the federal group, or who does that? Who actually produced all that?
All the items that were retrieved. It was actually a professional company called Global something or the other. That's what they do. They go to disaster sites and they, collect things. I mean, like I said to the one guy, and I think the guy I talked to was with the NTSB because, of course, they were involved in retrieving things too. But like I said, he said, well, we, do it for the people who remain, the families. And like even those guys, I said to them, have you found any cat remains? Because, our cat was like 18 and on its last legs and should have been like put down long before that. But anyways, and he said, no, he said, but we'll keep an eye out for it. And they did find those cat remains, and they're still in I still have the ashes because I was going to take them to our old house and I never did it. So they're still in my closet. So Spots is still with us also. Any other questions? Well, thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.